In the world of games, a revolution happens every couple years or so, and another one is upon us courtesy of Sega. Sega's Dreamcast is storming onto the streets of Japan right now, and 5 new titles will be released surrounding the launch, including Virtua Fighter 3 and Sega Rally 2. Japanese players can also expect RPGs, sports, and wrestling games. But last but not least, the biggest game for Dreamcast is the triumphant return of Sonic the Hedgehog in Sonic Adventure.
The Dreamcast, a triumph in the evolution of what is possible on home consoles and a tragic end to Sega's home console history. The Dreamcast did things and played games that no other home console at the time offered. It was truly an innovation of technology that paved the way for the next generation of gaming, only for it to be crushed by the weight of questionable ways Sega attempted to support the Dreamcast and the competition that would rival the Dreamcast after its launch. Sega's first console was the SG-1000. It was released in Japan on July 15, 1983, the same day that the Famicom was launched. This console did not get a worldwide release like the latter consoles did, but it was Sega's introduction to the home console market after the decline of the arcade business in Japan. The SG-1000 would be preceded by the SC-3000, which was basically an SG-1000 with keyboard support, then the SG-1000 Mark II, which updated the look of the console and added modified controllers. The next revision would be the Sega Mark III, Sega's first console to be released to a worldwide audience, where it would be more commonly known as the Sega Master System. Sega achieved moderate yet surprising success with their first console and the revisions that followed, but it was no match for the Famicom in Japan or the Nintendo Entertainment System in other parts of the world. The true successor to Sega's first console would be the Mega Drive, released in North America as the Sega Genesis, originally released in Japan in October 1988. The Japanese market still heavily favored the Nintendo consoles as well as the PC Engine, but Sega would achieve far greater international success. In North America, once Super Nintendo was launched, the console wars between Nintendo and Sega had begun. While Nintendo and Sega achieved success and popularity for different reasons, and while Nintendo did things Sega couldn't and vice versa, attention to the video game market had been revitalized by Nintendo and Sega's efforts to outdo one another. In 1994, Sega's next console, Saturn, was launched in Japan. This time, for the next generation of consoles, Sega was up against the Nintendo 64 and Sony's first console, the PlayStation. In North America, E3 1995 set the tone for how Saturn would stand up against the 64 and the PlayStation. While Nintendo used the event to show off their upcoming hardware and their Super Nintendo lineup for the remainder of 1995, Sega used the event to announce that the Sega Saturn had immediately been launched months earlier than expected, much to the chagrin of the retailers who hadn't planned for the launch during the summer.
We started our rollout of Sega Saturn yesterday. We're at retail today in 1,800 Toys R Us, software, etc., and electronic boutique stores around the U.S. and Canada. Our retail price is between $399 and $449. We have 10 software titles at retail in the next few days, 20 by August. Our total rollout will take the summer to complete, but we're starting today in store and starting today on primetime TV with these commercials. Sega Saturn is not only here now, it's out there.
The surprise launch in North America was at the request of Sega of Japan, who thought the surprise launch would help give them an advantage over the PlayStation, which was set to launch in North America, Europe, and Australia in the fall of 1995. But at Sony's E3 95 conference, head of SCEA at the time, Steve Race, made a brief but memorable impact with his announcement.
$299.
The $299 price tag would be $100 cheaper than what Sega was advertising their console for. The Saturn struggled to keep up with the performance of the 64 and the PlayStation, and Sega had been going through corporate changes affecting what games were localized outside of Japan and the attitude towards the Saturn. Saturn would end up selling 9.26 million units worldwide compared to the near 30 million units the Mega Drive/Genesis sold. Because of declining interest from Sega themselves and their declining profits through the mid-90s, the Saturn would be discontinued in 1998. Japan, however, would keep manufacturing Saturn units until 2000, as the Saturn still performed slightly better than the Nintendo 64 did in Japan. But this decision still left Sega without a home console to sell for over a year in international markets. In the wake of Saturn being discontinued, Sega would fill in the void by creating early hype for Sega's next console.
今回のパートナーズスペシャルはドリームキャストの発表会を完全密着取材だ。貴重なクリエイターのインタビューもあるぞ。では早速発表会の様子から見てみよう。
In May 1998, Sega publicly announced their next console, the Dreamcast. Dreamcast's initial announcement revealed a 128-bit processor chip, double the Nintendo 64's processing power, and 4 times the PlayStation and Saturn's processing power. Sega also pledged that the Dreamcast would be able to create 3 million polygons per second, compared to the Sony PlayStation, which could handle the most polygons compared to the Nintendo 64 and Sega Saturn at 360,000 per second. Sega also pledged a built-in network for online gaming and announced its memory card would also function as a portable gaming device to be used in conjunction with certain games. This would later be known as the VMU, Visual Memory Unit. The plan was for Dreamcast to be launched on November 27, 1998, Europe on October 14, 1999, Australia and New Zealand on November 30, 1999, and North America on September 9, 1999, with North America leaning heavily into its 9/9/99 launch date as part of their advertising campaign. When Dreamcast launched in Japan, it struggled to keep units in stock due to a shortage of power VR chipsets that the system required, and it struggled to entice gamers with a very limited launch year lineup. On launch date, the Dreamcast got Godzilla Generations, July, Pen Pen Trilsalon, and Virtua Fighter 3 TB. Sega had intended to launch Sonic Adventure alongside the Dreamcast, and was one of the most heavily hyped games in Japan. However, Sonic Adventure would end up releasing a month after the Dreamcast itself.
In the cutthroat video game industry, one word seems to be all-powerful.
The graphics. Graphics. The graphics. Better graphics means it's more realistic.
And embattled Sega's new Dreamcast video game console is graphically better. The first home unit able to handle 128 computer bits of data at once. Twice as much as the Sony PlayStation and Nintendo 64 machines that dominate the $12 billion a year US video game market.
60 frames a second, which is twice the speed of a TV. It equals graphics you've never seen before. When you watch a football game, it looks like you're watching a real game on TV.
North America and Europe had a far better launch year, with a far better launch year lineup, with Namco's Soul Calibur garnishing the most attention with some of the smoothest gameplay and some of the best graphics, surpassing what was on prior home consoles. For sports fans, NFL 2K also helped give the Dreamcast a memorable launch year outside of Japan. NFL 2K's success was due in part to Sega's acquisition of Visual Concepts, which was vital to them due to Electronic Arts having no interest in developing games for the Dreamcast. Without the sports titles of Electronic Arts, which had helped Sega succeed in the past, Visual Concepts would become Sega's first-party source for sports titles on the Dreamcast. Australia and New Zealand, on the other hand, had a terrible launch with the Dreamcast. No marketing, no first-party games, no internet right away, a price more expensive than in other territories, and its distributor, Aussiesoft, claims that many of the Dreamcast units could not be stocked due to them being stuck in customs. The games looked better than anything that had been on previous consoles, the gameplay experiences were unique compared to what had been on previous consoles, and arcade ports on the Dreamcast were the closest to perfect they had ever been. It seemed like Sega was primed for a huge comeback with the Dreamcast. But while the Dreamcast managed to have a successful and memorable launch, the Dreamcast would soon face even more hurdles. Sega was still not able to make profit, and Sega would soon be up against the PlayStation 2. Sega pushed for more units to be sold, but they were unable to keep up with the competition from Sony and the expectations from Japan. Sega did not have enough money to continue pushing the Dreamcast, so a choice had to be made: go bankrupt or abandon the console market. Peter Moore, then president of Sega of America, is quoted in an interview with The Guardian saying, "We had a tremendous 18 months. Dreamcast was on fire. We really thought that we could do it. But then we had a target from Japan that said, and I can't remember the exact figures, but we had to make N hundreds of millions of dollars by the holiday season and shift N millions of units of hardware, otherwise we just couldn't sustain the business. So on January 31st, 2001, we said Sega is leaving hardware. Somehow I got to make that call, not the Japanese. I had to fire a lot of people. It was not a pleasant day. We were selling 50,000 units a day, then 60,000, then 100,000, but it was just not going to be enough to get the critical mass to take on the launch of the PlayStation 2. It was a big stakes game. Sega had the option of pouring in more money and going bankrupt, and they decided they wanted to live to fight another day. So we licked our wounds, ate some humble pie, and went to Sony and Nintendo to ask for dev kits. After leaving the console market, Sega would shift its focus to supporting other platforms. At the time, it seemed unfathomable that Sonic games would appear on a Nintendo system. Sega continues to develop games for all the current consoles out there. They became profitable again through their continued support of the Sonic franchise and through other franchises like Yakuza / Like a Dragon and Persona thanks to Sega's acquisition of Atlus. While Visual Concepts would join Sega in making games for other consoles, the company would end up being sold to Take-Two Interactive in 2005. Visual Concepts continues to make sports games and is currently the official developer of WWE video games. The Dreamcast marked the beginning of what home console gaming would be like in the 21st century and the end of Sega's mark on the home console industry. All the ambitions, innovations, and technological advances of the Dreamcast could not keep up with Sega's struggling finances and competition from Sony. But the Dreamcast continues to be regarded as one of the most beloved consoles ever released, with one of the best launch lineups of any console in parts of the world. The dedicated Dreamcast fanbase even found ways to keep some of the game's online services open to this day. 1999 may have been a more memorable year for the Dreamcast, arguably the most memorable, but 1998 was the beginning of the Dreamcast and the beginning of the 21st century home console experience.
Sonic Adventure!
おいソニック、本当にやるのか？ああ。俺は冒険が大好きなのさ。
Okay, Sonic, go!
ヤッホー！あらあ
ソニックはアドベンチャーが好き。ソニックアドベンチャー。Dreamcast!
Suikoden 2, composed by Miki Higashino and Keiko Fukami. The main appeal of the Suikoden series had been the concept of recruiting 108 characters to help you on your quest. The music is described by director Yoshitaka Murayama as something that encompasses all 108 characters together, meaning the music could not limit itself to just one culture or one setting. It had to incorporate many cultures, many elements, and many different personalities. Most of the soundtrack was composed by Miki Higashino, who joined Konami in the 80s with her first game being the arcade hit Gradius. Keiko Fukami's contributions to the soundtrack include the pieces We Are Number One, On a Sunny Day, and all of the mini-game music except for the dancing and cooking games. The opening theme was performed by the Warsaw Philharmonic Orchestra and Chorus, conducted by Jerzy Sobota. The ending theme, La Pasión como la Storia, was performed by vocalist Anneli, and conducted by Higashino herself. The soundtrack was officially split into 2 volumes, each containing 2 CDs for a total of 105 pieces in the entire soundtrack. The large soundtrack was worked on with a small group of people. At first, it was just Higashino and programmer Kiyohiko Yamane working on the entire soundtrack. A lot of crunch time was put into this soundtrack because Higashino thought it was possible with just her and a few others to take on the daunting task. It was a task that she had underestimated, but a task that for better or worse became her representative work. The soundtrack ended up being so successful and so high quality for a single-disc PlayStation game, Final Fantasy composer Nobu Uematsu was inspired by the Suikoden series to greatly improve the sound quality of his own music for the upcoming Final Fantasy VIII. Suikoden 2 had an enormous soundtrack for a game that offered so much to do for a role-playing game on a single disc. Despite the fact that the soundtrack was composed under crunching circumstances, the game is still regarded as one of her best. After Suikoden 2, she left Konami due to the demanding schedule to focus more on her family, leaving Michiru Yamane to take over the role of primary composer for the Suikoden series.
Hey kid, where's my lunch money?
We haven't been flossing. You haven't been flossing.
Get a job.
Escape to a world of color for each and every Game Boy game. New Game Boy Color.
Useless woman.
Optic camouflage, huh? I hope that's not your only trick.
You doubt my power? Now, I will show you why I am the most powerful practitioner of psychokinesis and telepathy in the world. No, there's no need for words, Snake. I'm Psycho Mantis! That's right, this is no trick, it's true power. It's useless, I told you. I can read your every thought. Now, let me read your mind. No, perhaps I should say your past. You are a very methodical man, the type that always kicks his tires before he leaves. You are a highly skilled warrior, well suited to this stealth mission. You are extremely careful of traps. You are either very cautious, or you are a coward. Still don't believe me? Now I'll read more deeply into your soul. I can see into your mind. So, you like Suikoden? So, you like Azure Dreams? You like Castlevania, don't you? You enjoy role-playing games. I see that you enjoy Konami games.
見えるぞ、貴様の記憶が。ときメモが好きなようだな。ポリスノーツが好きなようだな。小島作品が好きなようだな。
いつも応援してくれてありがとう。
KCE ジャパンの作るゲームが好きなようだな。アドベンチャーが好きなようだな。恋愛シミュレーションが好きなようだな。
You have not said often. You are somewhat reckless. I can read you like an open book. You still don't believe me? I will show you my psychokinetic power. Put your controller on the floor. Put it down as flat as you can. That's good. Now I will move your controller by the power of my will alone. What do you think now? Can you feel my power now? The demonstration is over. Meryl!